in the next few days if you want to watch it again before your expedition or send it to a friend. Before I hand over the webinar to our special guest presenter, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Lindblad's heritage. Lars Erik Lindblad pioneered expedition travel in the mid-1960s, bringing the first non-scientific travelers on expeditions to destinations such as Galapagos and Antarctica. His son and our founder, Sven Lindblad, has continued this legacy of expedition travel. And in 2004, we entered into a strategic partnership with National Geographic, a collaboration in exploration, discovery, and conservation to inspire our guests to explore and care about the planet. This partnership provides access to an innovative, knowledgeable expedition team of naturalists, researchers, scientists, and of course, photographers. So on that note, tonight I am delighted to present our presenter for the evening, who is both a National Geographic photographer and is also the director of Lindblad's Expedition Photography Program, Ralph Lee Hopkins. Ralph, are you ready to go?
Yes, thanks, Amy, and good evening, everyone. And hello from the West Coast. Yeah, I'm Ralph, and I'm going to be talking to you tonight with the idea of helping prepare you. This is an exclusive presentation because only our booked guests for upcoming trips are invited to listen in. So I hope you're all comfortable and ready to sit down and go on a fast tour of some of the destinations with hopefully lots of tips and tricks that'll help you get prepared. I've been working with Lindblad for 23 years, starting out as a geologist on board and then becoming an expedition leader. And in 2000, we started the Photo Expedition Program, which is now grown with our alliance with National Geographic into our Expedition Photography Program. And it's just a natural every step of the way because travel and photography go together, and National Geographic and Lindblad now travel together. So photography can be the focus, a big part of your expedition and your experience, if you choose to make it so. It's an elective type of thing. It can be contagious, and it really photography, as I see it, enhances your travel experience because it puts you more in the moment when you're out there looking for images and looking to record your experiences. But that said, we're going to take a tour. We go so many places in the world, and many of you are jetting off to different destinations, all a trip in a lifetime themselves. Of course, Alaska, Arctic, Galapagos, and the Amazon are some of the marquee trips happening right now, with Baja and Antarctica not being in season, and many of you also are going off to charter ships. So we'll start by talking about Southeast Alaska. Here's the Seabird going through a cut in Misty Fjords National Monument. And there's times like this where we get out in Zodiacs and kayaks, and we set up situations for photography, like the ship coming through here. In the Amazon, we're traveling in these great boats. I just got back from 3 trips in March. Very comfortable skiffs that take you out on the river, looking for wildlife, going up the tributaries. So that's the Amazon. If you're going up to the high Arctic, I know the Ice Bear trips will be starting soon, and heading up to Norway. There's other things to think about up there, because you're going to be going to the land with 24-hour daylight. 24 hours a day, you're not going to see a sunset the entire time you're there. And if you're going down to the Galapagos, Galapagos is a dream destination. It's going to spoil you because the wildlife is there. You know, our other trips, you really have to search and look and need a lot of luck to have good encounters. But in the Galapagos, it's all right there before you. But the challenge is still making good images, because it's almost too overwhelming. And so I want to point out just a couple of things just at the start, because our ships, our Zodiacs and the kayaks, are your platforms for photography, and each are different. Each offer different opportunities, and none is better than the other, really, because they offer different vantage points. And this is illustrated on this ship, this photo here of the Explorer. You can see you can get down right at bow level. You can be up on a level in front of the chart room, or you can be up top on the observation deck. And I wish I could be in 3 spots at once, of course, when you have an encounter with a polar bear, or even as the scenery is going by. But you'll find yourself moving around, and you may adopt one spot, but you're going to want to really look for different angles, and keep in mind on the ship that you're you need to walk around carefully on the ship. You're in charge kind of your own safety. People get very excited with their camera gear. And here's the Seabird. Again, there's different ways for getting down to the bow, or you can be up on the bridge level. And from our Zodiacs, we spend a lot of time, and really the Zodiacs are the key to our operation, getting out at water level, getting on shore. But you got to be able to protect your gear from the errant splashes or the waves. So we'll talk about that. If you're an avid kayaker, even if you've never kayaked before, having a small, especially waterproof camera, and I can't stress this much, kayaking is a water sport. So if you ask, can I bring my digital SLR with my 300 millimeter lens? Well, sure you can, but you may get it wet and you may be very disappointed. It's not the reason to be in a kayak. It's better to have a small camera, but we'll talk more about that as well. The exciting thing about all our trips is that you're traveling alongside Lindblad National Geographic certified photo instructors on all the trips, and on many of the trips you're going to be with National Geographic photographers as well. So I want to calibrate your expectations a little bit, because you're heading off on different styles of trips. If you're heading out for a photo expedition, for example, I'm heading to the Galapagos the end of next week for 2 photo expeditions there. These are special voyages called photo expeditions with itineraries tweaked for photography. We get out a little early on shore, we linger in certain places a little longer, and you'll be traveling with a National Geographic photographer, or in the Galapagos case, photographers, and then also our certified photo instructors. And these photo instructors are enthusiastic naturalists and professional photographers who are there traveling with you to help you be in the moment, point out, situations, and make tips in situations, and also help you with your cameras. So they're there for you. So that's the photo expedition. On the National Geographic Explorer, every trip has a National Geographic photographer on board. It's our flagship, and also teamed with certified photo instructors. And we have a very large team, 10 or 12 naturalists on board of the Explorer, because it's it's our flagship, and it's going to the Arctic, where we've got 10 or 12 Zodiacs on board that we get you out on the water, get you ashore. So on the Explorer, you have a really good team that'll help you in your photographic pursuits. And then on all the other ships, if it's not a photo expedition, there's always a certified photo instructor. So this includes our charter vessels, and the Seabird and Sea Lion, and the 2 ships in the Galapagos as well. So that's a little overview. And everyone's interested in photography, right down to the Galapagos Sea Lion here. And we also encourage families to get involved with the photography program. It's fun being with kids. Kids get very interested when they see the results on the back of their digital cameras. And we're also working with National Geographic, who set up this My Shots program to encourage our guests, and especially the younger generation, to get involved online with their My Shot program. So that's the URL link there for that. So the way I want to organize this talk here this evening is to try to hit some of the frequently asked questions. I field all the questions that come in online to the National Geographic and Lindblad site for our expedition. On your part. It's not realistic to buy a new camera right out of the box, put it in your luggage, show up at the ship, and then say, can you show me how to use my brand new camera? Every camera is different. Every camera has a learning curve associated with it, so knowing your camera is number one. And practicing before you leave home. It sounds obvious, but we see it every trip, and I've done it myself. Full disclosure, you got to know your camera before you leave home. How do you store all these photos? We're going to talk about that. This is the digital era. Gone are the times where you just put the film in a baggie and wait till you get home. Now you've got to deal with all this data you're shooting, and what do you do to be safe so that you don't lose your pictures? What should I pack? Most of us tend to overpack. So let's talk about that. We'll talk about some tips, and then again, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be encouraging you to practice the things we talk about. And again, this is going to be recorded, so I know we're going to be going fast so that you can go back over this presentation and study the parts that you need more help in. Let's quickly talk cameras. What camera should I buy? It really comes down to the right camera for you. Your iPhone might be, or your smartphone might be the only camera you need. Depends on really your level of interest. It doesn't matter. You don't need a big camera. You're not going to be laughed off the deck of the ship. We see the best pictures made by people who understand their camera and have it available. So this goes from the point and shoot realm all the way up to the digital SLR. It's not about the camera, and I can't emphasize this enough. People get hung up on what model camera they're bringing. It's knowing how to use it, because it's you, the photographer, who clicks the shutter and makes the picture, makes the adjustments, and you don't need to wear the t-shirt to be a photographer. Our point and shoots, this is what we affectionately call the aim and creates. The advantage of these cameras is that they don't cost an arm and a leg. They're small and lightweight, so you always have them. They have amazing macro or close-up capabilities. Many of them are waterproof or come with very inexpensive underwater housings, and many of them have that flip-out LCD screen so you can shoot more easily at different angles. The disadvantages are quite well, they're disappearing with every new model, but some of them still have a shutter lag, that little delay before the picture is taken. And as you increase to higher ISOs, higher speeds, they tend to be very noisy on the high end. So that's something you have to decide whether you can live with. They also tend to have limited zoom range. And it all has to do with the sensor size that limits the image quality. But that said, they still make excellent pictures, even publishable pictures. And many of them, like Mike Greenfelder here, many of our naturalists even use the digital point and shoots, because we ended up teaching, let's face it, most of our guests, I'd say 80–85% of our guests have these smaller cameras. And they're great cameras, like the Canon G15. We recommend this camera because you can get an inexpensive, or relatively inexpensive, underwater housing, and it shoots raw, and it takes very high quality pictures. But there are so many different examples, whether it's Canon, Nikon, Fuji, Sony. Here's a waterproof model, a 12-megapixel waterproof model that Canon has that you can take underwater. So this is or just have it out and about. This is the one you can have around your neck in all sorts of weather, go kayaking with, and still make good pictures. But I think getting in the water, especially if you're going to the Galapagos, you're going to want to have a camera that can shoot underwater, either one of these aim and creates or fully dedicated underwater camera with this, the all-weather seals. And so here's a crazy marine iguana on the rock here with a photographer with a super zoom. Now these super zooms are kind of the notch up from the point and shoots, but they have an amazing zoom range. Some of them over 800 millimeters. So they go from wide angle to 800 millimeters. They flip at LCDs, and they're getting better with each generation. They're still not as good as with the larger SLR digital cameras for high ISO shooting, but many people are very happy with this style of camera, and I recommend it, especially for the wildlife destinations, because you need to be able to zoom in and you need to be able to control some of your settings, and you can do it with that camera. One of the specific models that was recommended to me by our friends at B&H is the Fuji. These numbers may be changing. They change every month or every week, and the reason that this is a recommended camera is it has a slightly larger sensor than some of the other super zooms, and it'll also shoot in RAW format. If you don't know what RAW format is, don't worry about that. RAW is just one way a camera records the image data. JPEG is what most of us shoot, and that's when the camera processes the image. But many of our more advanced amateurs and certainly the professionals shoot RAW because they like to process their images in Photoshop. So here's what a fully outfitted couple might look like in Antarctica. They've got their big guns, the Nikon digital SLR with their 200 to 400 millimeter lens for wildlife, but around June's neck here is the Sony mirrorless camera. Probably has the same focal range as the big camera, but it's just a different style of camera, and these are becoming very popular now amongst travelers because of their size and their versatility. They have interchangeable lenses. They're not cheap, and especially when you start paying for the glass as you get longer lenses. But they also do excellent video, so this might be a type of camera that you might want to consider. And then on up, of course, to the big guns, the digital SLRs. Again, it's not about being impressed with other people's cameras. It's about knowing how to use them. So, don't think you have to go this route because it costs an arm and a leg. They're more expensive. They weigh more. And, of course, the trade-off is that you're getting the best image quality. You can shoot at extremely high ISOs with very low noise now with the new cameras. You can shoot up to 10 frames a second when that polar bear jumps, and there's no shutter lag. You also get the full variety of lenses. Now, I'm not recommending that you bring every lens in your arsenal. I'm very happy now with my 70-300 4 to 5.6 zoom, and also my 24-105 zoom. I think with the zooms are so good now, going with big 500 and 600 millimeter lenses. I see better results with people having shorter focal lengths, and this is an important point here. Having like their 70-300 and giving a sharp picture, and then cropping to make the polar bear or the wildlife larger, than trying to have the 500 lug around a 500 millimeter lens and get a sharp shot with a heavy lens on a moving boat. So you don't need the long glass necessarily to make excellent pictures of wildlife. And of course, the SLRs go from anywhere from under $1,000 on up to now what, $6,000, $7,000 for some of the high-end cameras. You don't need to go that route either. Nikon, Canon, Sony all have excellent models. Here's that 70-300 I was talking about. It's a $1,500 lens, but it's sharp. It focuses quickly. And probably all camera manufacturers will have a similar lens. So it's all about getting the right camera for you. Certainly have a point and shoot, aim and create as your secondary or backup camera to whatever your main camera might be. If it is your main camera, then probably your iPhone would be your backup camera, because disaster does strike. And please don't forget about your phones, these smartphones that make amazing video, and it's always there for you to take a picture. Just protect it from the elements. So let's assume now you've got your camera, you're familiar with it, and now you're in a situation. And the number one question we step out on shore. We've got flowers and mountains, and the clouds are coming by. What should my settings be? How do we work with our camera? And this comes down to working with the shooting modes, something in digital that's called white balance, and hopefully this is review for most of you. Controlling the ISO, and then exposure compensation. These are really the four things that you need to know about your camera if you're going to take your photography to the next level. Well, here's Bud reading his manual. Of course, reading your manual is a great way to sleep on a plane, but it also can help teach you about your camera. But it's really better to get some of those books that are written by photographers in a more readable fashion. But this is what it all boils down to. With your shooting modes, you have choices. The auto modes, what we call the creative modes, and the scene modes. And these auto modes are the ones that have the icons. The problem with just going with green auto, and I know I can hear some folks saying, well, my camera always takes a good picture on green auto. Well, that could be true if all the light is even and the subject's not moving, and you're not concerned about the final image quality. Let's say you want to make prints for your wall. If you want to be able to control the settings more, the first thing you can do is at least go to these icons so that the camera gives you a faster shutter speed in the sports mode, or it helps blur the background and goes to center weighted metering for the portrait mode, or it gives you more depth of field in the landscape mode. So experiment with these other icons as a first step of going off of green auto. To take it to the next step yet, when you understand your camera, and not everyone's going to go take it this far, but there's aperture priority and shutter priority, and then program, which is like auto with privileges. In all these modes, you can adjust the color balance or the white balance, you can adjust your ISO, and you have control of the look of your picture by adjusting the f-stop. Also in these cameras, and again, it'll depend on what model you're using, some of the scene modes may be hidden in the menus that give you other um, capabilities. Like if you're shooting a white bear, for example, on a white iceberg, you might want to have it on the beach in snow setting. So there's certain scene modes that might be helpful depending on where you're traveling and what type of subjects. So I suggest really practicing with these modes in the backyard, shooting the dog, or going down to the beach, or whatever might be in your neighborhood to get fully, I guess, familiar with them. Typically, I'm shooting an aperture priority, which means I set the f-stop, or the opening in the lens that allows how much light could come through, and the camera automatically sets the shutter speed. So this is where I'm concerned mostly on the creative sense with the depth of field. If I want a shallow depth of field, I can open up to 2.8. Camera gives me the f-stop, or excuse me, the shutter speed, and I make my picture. Or I can go for the deep depth of field, like the cacti here in the foreground, by going to f22. If I'm more concerned with the shutter speed, that is, I want to, and especially when I know I want to blur the action and the conditions are right, got dim light so that I can shoot with a slower shutter speed, I might set it to shutter priority, where I have put it at a 15th of a second or a 30th of a second, or in this case, here's a sea line going by at a 1/6 of a second, to give a sense of motion. When I want to stop the action and there's lots of light, I can set it at a high shutter speed and stop the action. So that's working with shutter priority, and it's all about control with your camera. Here's a Sally Lightfoot crab in Galapagos with a slow shutter speed, the water washing over the crab. Of course, here I'm on a tripod, and the shot like this, I took 20, 30 shots of the same scene to try to get the water just right, and experimented with the different shutter speeds. So that's a quick run through, but here's something we're developing. Of course, I'll tell you that this is a joke, but wouldn't it be great if we had icons for the subjects we were shooting, and it would make the perfect picture? So of course we would, you'd use the polar bear setting when you go up north, the penguin setting when you went down south. So just a quick review, what should my settings be? Program, aperture, shutter, priority. The aperture is more for controlling depth of field, shutter priority when you want to control motion, and experiment with the icons, with the running man, with the portrait mode, with the flower mode on your cameras, and see if you get more control, and see if you like going that route. Become familiar with it. So what I'd like you to do, it's one of the practice assignments here, would be to explore your menu and go through your buttons and dials. You'll also want to learn how to turn on and off your flash. In most destinations, like in Galapagos, the national park asks that you don't flash the animals, because every day people are walking by on the trails, and if everyone shot with a flash, it'd be very disruptive, of course, to the animals. So learn how to turn off your flash. Look for the macro buttons so you can practice close-ups and practice. Also, one way to improve the performance of your cameras, especially with point and shoots and the super zooms, is to pre-focus. By pressing your shutter button halfway down, not only does it lock the exposure, but it'll lock your focus. So if you know the bird's going to take off and fly into the frame, you can lock your exposure, recompose, and wait for the bird to fly into your frame. That's something that we all do. We call it pre-focusing. And then I haven't talked about this yet, but you're going to want to find your exposure compensation dial or button, what we call the EV, and that's for changing the exposure either lighter or darker when you're in these different shooting modes. But before we get to that, I want to mention an important thing in digital photography, and especially in the different destinations that you'll be traveling in, that is white balance, or the color balance that the camera is going to record. Now, if you're shooting in RAW, you're going to process this later, so it's not something you need to worry about, but most of us shoot in JPEG, and the camera processes in what the color balance is going to look like. And in the old days, this translated to the different films. Kodachrome film had a very warm rendition, so it was great for red rocks and sunny skies and sunsets. And there was other films that were better for portraits, for example. But what can happen now with these digital cameras is your camera, especially when it's on an auto white balance setting, can look out at your picture here and actually dull it down and take the color out, because the camera is always trying to give a neutral color balance. It doesn't want color casts from magenta or down into the cyan. It wants to make it nice and neutral and blue. So the auto might fool you, whereas if you purposely change to daylight and you're shooting a warm subject, it'll lock you in at this 5500 degrees Kelvin and give you a nice warm rendition, whereas cloudy would also give you an even warmer rendition, because the cloudy white balance is actually designed for counteracting for the blue cast on a cloudy day. So, but you can actually use the cloudy white balance as kind of a little pre-saturation button in your camera. And the only time I would use auto is when I'm indoors. And here's a shot of my studio, and you can see how the auto setting now makes the walls gray. That's the color of the walls, whereas the daylight setting with the tungsten lights is coming out very warm. So you can experiment with white balance, use it as a creative control, but there are situations in nature where you want it to be warmer, like the sunsets and sunrises I was talking about, and colorful landscape scenes. But when you're shooting the bears out on the ice, I'm going to recommend that you not have it on auto, but go to your daylight setting so that the camera maintains the blue of the water and the blue of the ice, and it doesn't muddy it up like it's doing here. You can see what the cloudy setting and shade setting does. And the camera might choose not to give you the nice blue daylight setting, especially if it's a cloudy day and there's not a lot of range of different color temperatures and there's a lot of blue out there. The camera might decide to go from this to this. So to go from that blue rendition, which is what you want, to having the blue corrected for. So that's just a little bit about white balance. So there are certain situations where you can be on auto. Underwater is one where you want the camera to counteract for all the blue, the mixed light sources that I mentioned. But for truer colors and certainly maintaining the blues, you want to be in daylight. For warmer renditions, you can be shooting in the cloudy white balance mode. And so here's an example of a sea lion underwater. And you can see how the camera, well, you can't see how, but it would be much, much more blue if the color balance wasn't corrected by the auto setting. So a practice assignment here would be to compare results. Practice with the white balance. Take the same shots in the same situations, but at different white balance settings. Okay, and see what you like and what works for you, and at least know that it exists. Maybe many of you have never taken it off auto. The other leg of that, when you think about the aperture and the shutter speed, how they work to control the exposure, the other arm of that, or leg of that, or point of that triangle, is the ISO, or the shutter speed. Excuse me, the speed of the sensor. It used to be we were talking about the speed of film. Now you're able to adjust. Of course, this has been happening for years since digital came about, but controlling the ISO is not something that everyone thinks about as a creative control. And you have total control of the ISO and the shutter speed. By increasing the ISO, we needed a faster shutter speed. So when you have low light conditions, you can up your ISO, and that'll help you freeze the action in many situations. Because if you're going to the Amazon, you're shooting in a dark, speckly light, tough light forest. The tropics is one of the most difficult places to shoot because of the darkness in the forest, and because of all the distracting backgrounds with seeing through the sky, or the way the leaves block the light. So you're going to be continually going up to higher ISOs. When you start out, you're usually at 800, but by the time you're back in the forest on some of the side channels, you'll be at 1600, even sometimes 3200, like for the spider monkey running along the branches. And we'll even stay out to twilight to look for caimans, so you can even up your ISO even more and control the light when they're spotlighting, and if you're lucky enough to find a caiman. So here at 1600 ISO, I was over 200th of a second, and if you sit there, don't just take one shot, but go click, 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 click. Even though you're shooting with a longer lens and it's a slower shutter speed, 200th of a second isn't that slow. But remember, the millimeters of your lens, if you have a 300 millimeter lens, you at least want a shutter speed of 1/300, or 300th of a second, It's kind of the rule of thumb, 1 over the focal length of the lens. And then you just got to hold really still and take little bursts and see if you get a sharp one. So tips for working with the ISO: use the lowest ISO for the situation. So if you're walking out around on shore, 100, 200, even 400 is fine when you're not on a moving ship or the animals aren't moving. But don't be afraid to increase your ISO that you can get faster and faster shutter speed so that you can shoot in lower and lower light situations. But it's a balance. Again, when you increase your ISO, you get what's called digital noise. It's that colored, speckled look to your pictures. The newer cameras have less noise. The big SLR cameras, that's the reason we spend thousands of dollars, is so we can shoot at 1600 ISO with low noise, because they have larger sensors. That's why they have lower noise. And then the cameras like your point and shoots that have the small sensors, you probably can't get much past 800 without having a lot of noise. So shoot as high as ISO that you need, especially to stop the action and get a good picture. So your practice assignment here for ISO would be to shoot at different ISOs and compare the results. Shoot in a low light situation, see how far you can take it, see what works for you. If you're just into recording your experiences, don't even bother about the noise factor. You'll have a shot in the conditions that you had, and hopefully you'll get a sharp picture, something that you can share with your friends and family. But if you're trying to take your photography to the next level, you want to test and see what the limitations are of your camera. Now jumping from, so we've worked with ISO, we've talked about the color balance and our shooting modes. You're going to have some special situations, and bright skies would be very similar to bright snow and ice situations. And there's some conceptual things that here you need to understand, about how your camera works, and that's how understanding exposure and how your camera sees the light relative to your f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO. So when your camera is all set and it's pointed at something, especially something that's bright or white, and here we're in the wrong hemisphere here. Here are penguins. So if you're going to the Arctic, we're talking polar bears, not penguins. The camera meter thinks it's correct when everything is gray. The camera sees the world in black and white. It wants to make what is white gray. So it is underexposing the picture, or underexposing the image. So you have to consciously try to fool your camera when things are bright to keep the picture white. So we say that we go plus on the EV value. It's a little bit counterintuitive, because when you have a dark subject, what does the camera try to do with a dark subject, seeing things in black and white? It tries to make something that's darker or going towards black. It tries to make it gray or a middle gray. So the camera is actually overexposing what is dark. So you want to underexpose darker scenes like this crazy marine iguana on the darker lava rocks. So the camera sees the world in black and white, and it thinks the correct exposure is middle gray. So you have to fool your camera to keep from underexposing something that's brighter white or overexposing something that's dark. And it comes down to, if you understand the histogram, this digital light meter, you don't really need to understand it here. You can read more about it after the seminar. But this is a scale that goes from black to white. And what we're seeing here is the camera's counting the pixels. So we can see in the shadows there's a lot in the black side and there's a lot in the white, and what's in the middle should be gray. So if we were to take an underexposed picture of penguins where the white snow and ice went down to gray, that's what the histogram would look like, whereas we would rather it look like this, where your highlight peaks are to the right. We say shoot bright in digital, keep your highlights to the right. And we're going to tell you how to do this with your EV. So in many of your settings now, certainly in aperture priority and even your program, you can correct for being underexposed by moving the exposure compensation to the plus side, because your camera is going to try to make a gray picture of the white bear on the white ice, and you've got to purposely overexpose a little bit. And how much you overexpose, these cameras are getting very smart. So I always take the first picture right on zero, and then look and see what where things lie, and then go plus. Sometimes, depending on the conditions, you're plus 1.5. So you're overexposing to get that shot of the bear on the white ice. So you need to understand where your exposure compensation button or dial is on your camera, and you go plus for the white scenes and minus for the dark scenes. And I know this isn't counterintuitive, so remember it this way: add light to light. Stefan Lundgren first taught me that. You add light to light on the bright scenes, and then we say darken down for those scenes where it's dark and you don't want the camera overexposing because it's trying to compensate, making things middle gray. So in practice, you're going to expose on the and meter on the scene, shoot a test image, review it on your histogram if you have time and understand it. And we can teach you that on board. We'll have hands-on sessions. We'll have talks about photography. But it's great to review these things and then, of course, learn how to adjust your exposure accordingly. So another little practice assignment in your spare time, and that would be to find your exposure compensation EV button and just shoot a sequence. Even take the same scene and just dial through, find your histogram, and then see how the peaks change and see how the image quality changes from dark to light and see what works for you. Storing your photos. So how, we've been talking about settings now, but now let's get down to some of the practical things, because we just basically went through a mini workshop on the camera. Memory cards, laptop and hard drives, and how do you download and back up when you're traveling. The best way to do it, here's a group a couple years back with all their Mac laptops. The best way, there's a couple of PCs still in there, but all those people have gone to the Apple now. But the best way to shoot, download, and view your work is if you bring your laptop. They're getting smaller. You just have to commit to it if you're willing to take it to that level. But there's other ways of going there, and we'll talk about that, how to back up your work. Memory cards, make sure you have enough for what you're doing. Make sure it's right for your camera. Try them out. I know it's confusing, all the different varieties, but there's just a couple different. There's the SD and the compact flash, and make sure you have a good way to store them. Get them out of those little plastic cases that just seem to want to fling your flash card overboard. Get them in some kind of wallet or card safe. And pay attention, again, look at the specs of your camera relative to the flash cards, and get the right type and the right speed, and you can go from there. There's many different brands. It really doesn't matter. I always just stick with the name brands like SanDisk, Lexar, and there's a couple of others. I know Costco has their brand, and they're made all in the same factories, but sometimes quality can vary. So we're talking about your pictures and talking about, this is basically like your digital film. So get enough cards and make sure they work in your camera, and just try them out before leaving home. So you're going to shoot more pictures than you've ever imagined on all these trips. So whether you want to bring your laptop, that's one option. Even if you bring your laptop, you'll want a portable hard drive to back up to and a flash drive for sharing your pictures. Because again, you are going to shoot more pictures than you ever dreamed of. Working with a laptop, I no longer have room on my laptop because the images are getting so large to store any pictures on my laptop, so they all go to a portable hard drive. Actually, it goes to 2 portable hard drives now, so that there's 2 copies of every picture if you're going the downloading route. That's what we call backing up, because drives can fail, and everyone, I'm sure, has had an experience where you've lost information because your card or drive has failed. So have things in 2 spots, and downloading to your laptop, you will jam up your laptop very quickly, especially on the longer trips if you're shooting lots of images. So make sure you have 2 hard drives to download to. If you don't want to carry your laptop, many of our ships, not the charter ships, but the ships called National Geographic, we have a photo kiosk, a Mac workstation that has a card reader, USB ports for downloading your pictures to your own hard drive or to your flash drives, or you can just view your pictures and save the downloading to later. But we have this. I want to make this available to you so that you know that you don't have to bring your laptop necessarily, and you can still work and back up your photos. the workstation is not for doing Photoshop. It's just simply for transferring and backing up images. These are what these small hard drives look like. They're getting up to now 2 terabytes for just a little over $100, so they're cheap. So you get a couple of them, and then you're set. Flash drives. Many of the ships will sell these on board, but you might as well bring one because this is a great way of not only bringing a copy of your passport and your travel documents, but also backing up or sharing pictures. If you're just shooting JPEGs in a small camera, you get a 16 gigabyte flash drive and you can probably back up all your pictures just that way. So these flash drive or thumb drives, you shouldn't leave home without one. And here's an important note about iPads. I know everyone loves the new iPads and new tablets, but they are not storage devices for photography. They will fill up very quickly. It's a little bit cumbersome. You need the special adapters to download them to. They're great once you have your work edited and you have your top 20 pictures and you want to put them in a slideshow, but it's not the workhorse for photography that everyone might have hoped because of the small storage capability. Now that could change in the future, but that's at the moment. So the way it stands with the tablets. So tips for storing your photos: bring enough memory cards for entire voyages, bring your laptop back up to hard drives, and then use your flash drive. Of course, the practice assignment has to do with doing all these tasks. So practice, practice, practice. And remember, and if you don't know this already, the best way to clean your cards once you've downloaded and you have your images back up is to reformat. Use the format function in the camera, and that'll set the card clean. How do I protect all my gear? I know how to back up now. This is, what do I pack? What do I leave home? Of course, you're going to want your camera of choice, your backup camera, which would be a point and shoot. The way I get camera gear to, I believe in wheels, having a rolling camera bag. And then I have a computer bag that fits over the top of the rolling camera bag. Everything else goes in the checked luggage. I make sure to bring all my hard drives and flash drives and things, and I have rain covers for my cameras, rain cover for my backpack. I bring knee pads for kneeling down, and I bring extra cameras or extra batteries and memory cards. Getting organized. Of course, this is our friend from B&H. And a little setup photo here. These are some of our guests actually in Juneau because they'd already run out of space. They were looking for more memory cards. So you want to be prepared. And this is my rolling bag and my computer bag. The rolling bag brings my gear so I can carry it all on. It doesn't have to go under the plane. And then my shoulder bag has all my computer gear. And of course, I've got all the extras. Anything that I need to function as a photographer, I carry on the plane. And then I'll have a field bag, and that can go in my duffel, but the field camera bag, whether you use a backpack or sling, so there's the travel bag and then the field bag once you get there. Of course, they can be the same, but I love the sling bags. I don't have to put it down. I can get in and out of it. I've got a light tripod for working. You got to watch your gear, though. Even though you've got your camera gear in a bag, I found this bag just on, the sea lion could come up and lay on top of this, or the wind blows and put sand in your bag. So really guard your gear. Be prepared for wet landings. Many of our landings will be in the swash zone or even the surf zone. So you can go as far as a dry bag. These are a little bit extreme. You can use the trash bag method. The idea is just to protect your gear from the splashes. Having it necessarily only around your neck may not be the way to go because of the weather and the splashes. Camera rain cover, certainly for Southeast Alaska, even Galapagos and the Arctic and the Amazon, I guess all of them, you want some kind of rain cover. You can go with, again, the more expensive variety, but this is what we set on board, and this is what you should always have in your camera bag. They're like two for $10, the rain sleeve. And that's good enough to protect your gear should it start raining, because you're still going to want to shoot. All the peripherals, the main one here being the knee pads and the rain cover. Knee pads are great for getting down, shooting low. They can be comfortable. I don't like the stiff variety. I like the more flexible variety. So what you pack, again, just to reiterate, you're going to want to be able to bring your cameras on the plane and put the rest of your items underneath with your check bags, including if you bring your tripod. You don't necessarily need your tripod because now with shooting with higher ISOs, it really depends on the type of photography you like to do, and with the image stabilized lenses and being able to increase to higher ISOs. But for many of us, we still love to travel with our tripods. Or you can choose a monopod, which will help you with a walking stick, and you put your camera on top to steady it. That's also very good out on deck. Or even carry a beanbag. Here's Manuel using a cactus in Baja. Tripods, of course, are helpful, but they're not completely necessary. I think monopods now can be the way to go, especially in the Arctic where you have the long lenses and you're waiting for the animal to jump, and it takes the weight off your shoulders. GorillaPods, not really a good option for hanging on the ship. They're fine on shore because this just transmits the vibration of the ship to the camera. It's better to have the monopod on your foot or have your camera on a beanbag on the rail. Many different varieties, but what I like to go with now, maybe it's just my advancing age, is going with smaller and lighter, like this this Oben tripod that I got from B&H. It's a lightweight one, 3 pounds, and it's 4 sections, and it compressed to about 16 inches. So that will fit very easily in your camera bag. The one filter, people always ask about filters. For darkening skies and cutting reflections on the water, the polarizing filter is the one filter to carry. Only put it on your camera when you need it by rotating the front element. You go from what looks like a washed out sky here to a nicely polarized sky. That also helps see through the water, looking at marine mammals, should you have whales or dolphins in the water. Of course, there's a lot of different types of filters, but it's the polarizing filter and also the protection UV filter will save your lens. If you drop your camera or drop a lens, you'll break the filter and not the front lens element. So I know I'm going a little long here, and I want to get to your questions, but I just want to go through a few things from specific voyages, starting with from the Arctic to the Amazon, the Galapagos, and Alaska. And I think I actually started in the Amazon. Fast shutter speed for stopping the action of a sloth. No, just kidding. They move very slowly, but this is what you're up against in the Amazon, though, is shooting against white skies and leafy backgrounds. You're in a very comfortable boat. You can bring your arsenal. You have your camera bag right at your feet. You've got your binoculars. They've got water for you. Very great way to go and photograph and see wildlife. Condensation's always a question, especially in the tropics. Don't put your camera gear in the air conditioning. We keep them outside, hanging on hooks in the companionways. So that way your camera doesn't cool down so that it doesn't condense when you bring it out. It'll still happen on some occasions, but you just want to avoid putting your camera in the air conditioning. Why not just use auto? Well, you know the answer to that now, especially in the Amazon. You're going to be dealing with some very challenging exposures, the contrast between the bright eye and the dark leaves, fast-moving subjects. So you want to think about going to Running Man. Again, it doesn't matter what camera you're using, or I just lost my train of thought there, but you want to be able to shoot with faster shutter speeds. You want to be able to control things. So that's why you want to get beyond just the green auto, so that you can increase your ISO, so that you can shoot in burst mode and go click, click, click when the animal goes by, so that you can get to the cloudy white balance for warmer pictures in the rainforest. And so you can have a single focus point. You can't have a spread of focus points because you're shooting through leaves, so you need a single focus point. So those are the type of things for the Amazon you're going to want to practice with, like here with this Jacana. You know, you don't want to focus on the grasses, you want to focus on the animal. Great place for macro. The Amazon's probably one of the best places for macro. The guides in many places will find frogs and different insects. Use your macro mode. Get down there with the ants. Kneel down. Get your knees dirty. Look for macro subjects. This moth was right on the ship. There's a few things when using macro mode. Find that flower icon. It's best with these point and shoots. You want to zoom out to wide angle and then put your camera close. Pre-focus, putting the button halfway down, and just hold it as still as possible. You've got to remember, though, against the white skies, the camera's going to underexpose, so you've got to add light to light so that you have bright skies behind your animals. Add light to light when you have those bright backgrounds. Same thing in the Arctic, of course. You're going to have lots of opportunity for shooting from the ship. The ship is a great platform. The Zodiac is a great platform, but it's harder to shoot from. So concentrate on getting a lot of your shots, especially the scenics, from the ship, and protect your gear on landings. One reminder about when you're in the Arctic with the polar bears, try to share the space, keep your voice down, watch slamming doors, because that sound travels very long distances over the ice, and you can scare the wildlife away. iPhones, just a reminder about using your iPhones, about wearing gloves. Be prepared for the conditions. These are the gloves of choice that I like, with the Miller mitts and the mitten over the top. Reminder about the white balance. In the Arctic, with the blue ice, you want to go with daylight white balance. Don't let your camera decide, because you want to be able to overexpose slightly with the daylight white balance to get the true colors. Add light to light. Another reminder there. Galapagos. It's going to spoil you, but it's going to be tough because there's a lot of distractions. It's better to get down low than standing straight up, and you're going to want to be able to shoot underwater. So look for clean backgrounds. Really choose your subjects. Get down low. Put the head of the albatross against the sky and the blue water. Kneel down. Even lay down. Do whatever it takes. Keeping the rules in mind and giving the animals leeway, because the animals are right on the trail. And if you move slowly and keep your distance, you can get really amazing shots. And it really varies from standing up and looking down on the blue-footed booby to shooting down at their level. Same thing with any wildlife, but especially also with the giant tortoises. Get down on their level and get in the water. If you love to snorkel, even if you've never snorkeled before, have a camera with an underwater housing. Here's Joel Sartore, the National Geographic photographer, with a big housing. But all these little cameras, especially the ones that are totally waterproof or have housings, are great for getting underwater and swimming with the sea lions and the marine turtles. In Alaska, very exciting destination. A couple of tips here. Bond with your boots. You'll be able to walk anywhere. You'll be able to do all the activities by having boots. We have some on board, but get a good pair of boots and embrace the weather. Some of the best photos in Alaska are when there's mist and hanging in the trees and weather around. And then remember to increase your ISO for faster shutter speeds. So the rubber boots, enough said there, being able to protect your gear, embracing for the weather. I even love to shoot black and white in Alaska because of all the mist and the trees. And many of the shots of wildlife are better in diffuse or cloudy light, like photographing bears and the whales and the icebergs. The ice appears before if it's not washed out by the full sun. And then finally, get up early, stay out late, enjoy the experience. Listen to the naturalists. Many times they'll know the cues of the animals. Sometimes the behavior will repeat and you'll have a second chance. And practice and be ready in the moment, whether it's the collared hawk taking off in the Amazon to the whales feeding up in southeast Alaska, or even a breaching whale. So I think I've used up my time. We've got still a little bit of time for questions. Amy will come back on here in a second. Seminars, workshops. Remember your practice assignments. Listen to this seminar again. You can also join us for our photographic seminars with National Geographic. We also do workshops around the country. You can check the websites for that. I'll be in Tucson, December. I also have a longer version of a lot of these things on a B&H video that's online with B&H, and I've also written a book on the subject, available at Amazon. So thank you, everyone, and we'll feel free also to write questions. Amy should be here momentarily.
Yes.
Amy,
yes.
You there?
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for what a great presentation. Thank you so much, and for sharing all of your beautiful images. This was great. I know I'm ready to go. So we do have time for just a few questions, and I see some questions coming in about specifically related to filters. A few people have asked about bringing a graduated ND filter. Can you talk about whether or not that's necessary, or if you have a recommendation there?
Well, the image that's up on the screen right now was shot with a graduated neutral density filter, and that is a more advanced technique where there's a gray or darker half to it that you put against the bright sky so you can balance the light. And I would say if you know how to use the ND filter, go ahead and bring it. But if it's something that's new to you and you haven't practiced with, hold off, or buy one and start practicing with it. So it's a little bit more of an advanced technique. It's usually for folks that are shooting with digital SLRs, looking to really refine the look of an image.
Okay, great. Another question coming in here, a few different questions about vibration on deck, and someone has asked, will image stabilization on a telephoto lens overcome the vibration of the ship itself when a tripod is used? And then we have a couple of other questions just related to vibration on deck in general and whether or not.
Yeah, well, our ships don't vibrate all that much. Certainly there is vibration if it's clamped on the rail, but just by your body dampening the effect. So if you're hand holding your camera with the image stabilization, vibration isn't an issue. You can also want to get your shutter speed up fast enough so that you overcome any motion of the ship. So then that even lessens the effect of any vibration. You really don't want to set a tripod up on the ship because that transmits the vibration. So most of us will use our tripod or use a monopod, or tripod as a monopod, and even put it on our foot, or even put a beanbag on the deck if it is becoming an issue. But most of the time our shutter speeds are fast enough because of the shooting situation that from the ship vibration is not an issue.
Great. Someone's also asking about how photography is incorporated into the rest of the expedition. So can you talk a little bit about any talks that the photo instructor might give or the National Geographic photographer may be able to give on board, or instruction?
Yeah. I didn't talk much about that, but there's a whole program when you get on board, from an introductory talk, which just reviews some of the basics, which I've kind of gone through here, but it'll be even more tailored to the destination, and that's usually given by the photo instructor. The National Geographic photographer typically will give you a more advanced talk or a talk about their work in different parts of the world, giving you examples. And of course, those folks are there. A lot of the teaching happens one-on-one. We have what's called breakout sessions. So we'll have a talk, and then we'll spend 20 or 30 minutes, or even during tea time, just have groups get together talking about cameras, talking about situations. So one-on-one, really, there's a lot of time for one-on-one to be prepared for the next shooting opportunity.
Great. Okay. So one of the last questions coming in here I see is about lens hoods, and can you talk a little bit about using lens hoods in low light or sunsets?
Oh, well, yeah, the lens hood. I'm glad there is this question, because if they're talking about lens hood as the sunshade, that protective cover that kind of extends the length of your lens, I am greatly in favor of that. And I also I've thought about putting it actually in the slideshow, because not only does it help block the sun from hitting the front element of your lens, which can cause refraction through the lens, and you get all those distracting features in your pictures, but it protects the front of the lens from the mist and weather that you might be having, and if you drop your camera. So it's not so much about the different situations, but it definitely helps with the sun hitting the front of the lens, but it's a great protection device, and I recommend having one on all your different lenses.
Great. Okay, and our final question here is about light meters. Do you ever carry a light meter on these trips, or do you recommend it?
Well, light meters, luckily our camera has a light meter, and it used to be in the old days, which is like 10-12 years ago, if we were shooting with a camera that didn't have a light meter, we had a handheld light meter, and we made our adjustments, and then we set our camera manually. But most of our cameras now have their own light meter. They're very accurate. We typically use them in the matrix metering mode, where it averages the scene. So unless you're doing very specialized work, or you've gone back to a manual camera, which is rare to see these days, would you need a handheld light meter.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Ralph. This was a wonderful presentation, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. I think we've covered many of the questions that came in earlier in the presentation, but again, as Ralph mentioned, this will be recorded, so by all means, be sure to check in at expeditions.com/webinar in a few days. You'll also receive an email link from Lindblad Expeditions taking you directly to the webinar presentation itself. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and thank you again, Ralph, for the great